wrapping up here at One Jets Drive, but a very busy weekend lies ahead for the Jets.
It's not wrapping up. We're just about getting started, but it felt like yesterday when we were starting off here in the BetMGM studio, kicking things off here in training camp. This is the last training camp practice, the last training camp live. Next week we'll be in regular season mode. Practice today.
Yeah, no doubt. The programming is not stopping. The programming is actually increasing here in the BetMGM studio. That leads us to today's headline presented by JetBlue. It's kind of one and the same here. Training camp is wrapping up, even though it does mean that football is really around the corner.
So you mentioned it at the top. There's Sam Darnold. We know he's going to be part of the 53-man roster as the Jets have to get down from 80 to 53 Saturday afternoon at 4 p.m. Then it's going to be a very busy next 24 hours or so for Joe Douglas and company, because after those 5 or 6 tough roster decisions, they're going to be scouring the NFL waiver wire and probably will pick up a few guys, have some waiver claims, and you have to do that by noon on Sunday. And then, Greens, there's an expanded practice squad in the National Football League this year where you can have as many as 16 players on the practice squad. So busy weekend ahead for the Jets. This is the last day for the players on the field prior to all that this weekend. And transactions ahead. This is Joe Douglas and his staff aren't going to get much sleep coming up.
No, they're not. And I'm glad you mentioned the practice squad. Bunch of different rules this year. You just mentioned 16 players. The intricacies here, you can block other teams to take players from your practice squad, up to 4 guys. And real quick on the waiver claim, I know Joe Douglas said that he's going to exhaust every possible avenue, every option to improve this roster. Just to give some context, last season, this time last year, the Jets claimed Braxton Barrios on waivers. He was second in the NFL in punt return average and has had a very good camp. They claimed Bennett Jackson, who played some games for them last season. They also claimed John Franklin Myers, who's had a rather quietly nice camp. He's right there, number 56, going through stretch line. So it's not like you're just filling out the back half of your roster. You can find some guys that can make impacts in this season.
Oh, you certainly can. It's going to be one of the most unique cut-down weekends in NFL history, just because you started training camp here with 80 players as opposed to 90. So the Jets were victim of a few injuries, so they got thin at a few positions. Most notably, we're talking about receiver throughout training camp, running back of late, safety of late. But you're going to be down to 53, and then you have an opportunity to take a look at what else is out there. Because the Jets are very deep in a number of positions. They're going to have to release some people who they know are NFL players or they want to develop. That's where the practice squad comes into play, and that expanded practice squad. The great thing about the practice squad this year is you have 4 blocks per week. You have 4 blocks per week. So if a team comes in and says, okay, we want this guy on our active roster, you can say no. But only up to 4, so about 25% of your practice squad this year.
Good news for the Jets right here. You see Marcus May
Got the
going
helmet
through
on?
stretches. The Jets are in shells today, so probably means a bit of a lighter day for the Jets on the practice field, but that's good news because he's somebody that missed a couple practices with a calf injury, more precautionary, and we'll talk about the full injury list later. But as a whole here, as training camp is wrapping up, EA, the Jets are getting a little healthier.
Yeah, they certainly are, and it's a very good sign to see Marcus May back there on the field, because if you're going through camp superlatives, you would say that Marcus May has had as good as camp as anybody out there on the field. And he did not play out there at MetLife Stadium on Sunday. He started practice, the workout, but little calf tightness, so they held him out here earlier this week. But he's ready to go. If you're Joe Douglas and Adam Gase and company, you just want to get to next week and get as many guys healthy as possible, and May's one of them.
One guy that I know Jets fans are excited to see practice went through individual drills yesterday. That's rookie wide receiver Denzel Mims. And for more on him, let's head to our Field Pass presented by Toyota with Olivia Landis. Liv, good morning. What can you tell us about the Jets rookie wideout?
Hamstring injury, that nagging hamstring injury. He's really just been out here watching all of the plays. I spoke to him yesterday. It was the first time he was finally able to participate in individual drills. I said, how important were those mental reps for you on the sidelines before you physically practice with your teammates? He said as important as those reps were, what he really missed was being on the field with his teammates. I asked him if there were any veteran wide receivers that he looked up to in that room. He said one individual that he always gets information from and tips from is wide receiver Brashad Perriman. He said he's tall, he's fast like me, and he plays on the outside. So he is an individual that Mims has really been looking out for. Now, yesterday when he spoke to the media, Mims was asked, do you think you're going to be ready to play in Week 1? And he said, most definitely. So finally, we're out here in training camp. We're seeing him get some individual drills going. Hopefully, he'll be participating in team drills soon because as we all know and as we've discussed, that wide receiver position is getting a little thin with injuries. So it's good to see the rookie back in the mix.
Hey, Liv, just real quickly, what do you think the timetable is for Denzel Mims? Because I know a lot of Jets fans were super pumped when he said he was definitely going to be ready for Week 1. But you talked to him yesterday. Did he talk in terms of specific timetables?
He didn't say specific timetables, but he did feel and he did seem very confident when he mentioned that he was ready for Week 1. Now we're going to have to wait and hear what head coach Adam Gase says because Adam Gase has been saying you cannot rush players back, especially on a hamstring injury. A hamstring injury is very touchy. Every guy is different. They each heal at their own pace. But like I said, he was out in individual drills yesterday. Hopefully we'll see him in team drills today. But he was very confident when asked, are you going to be ready for Week 1? He said, most definitely. So hopefully we will see him in a green and white jersey come Buffalo.
Awesome, Liv. Appreciate the time. We'll check in with you later in the show. Good news also for the Jets. As we were watching the practice field, I saw Braxton Barrios with a helmet and in shells. He did not practice yesterday because of a lower back injury, so we'll monitor the full injury report. But first, not only with Denzel Mims, at the cornerback position, Pierre Desir almost kind of on a similar timetable, went through individual drills for the first time in training camp yesterday as well.
Under the table, Greens, because everybody's talking about the receiver position. That typically happens during training camp, and the Jets have dealt with a lot of injuries, and I feel like we've been talking about the wide receiver position throughout camp. But Pierre Desir is a guy who's penciled in to be a starter for this team, and that him getting back on the field in individual drills is a critical piece because these guys have to practice, and there is Pierre Desir right now. Great job by the production crew here, Jets 360. Number 35, participating in individual drills. You want to continue to have him ramping up, and hopefully he can practice fully at least by next week. Maybe you'll just see him backpedaling and go through some individuals again today, and maybe he'll watch team drills because the Jets really scaled back teamwork yesterday. I thought there were probably less than 25 team reps in all yesterday.
Number 33 right there, that's probably the Jets' new defensive back, Zane Lewis, who they claimed the other day on waivers from the Arizona Cardinals. He just shifted off the screen. He's to the left of Ashton Davis. But really quickly here, EA, this cornerbacks group is one that you would have assumed Pierre Desir on one side, TBD on the other, Brian Poole in the slot. Jets have some tough decisions at this position because a lot of these guys have gotten first and second team reps that maybe you didn't think they would have throughout training camp.
Yeah, and that's just the nature of what's going on in the National Football League. The guys, there is a critical piece who got back, who's participating in team drills. That's Brian Poole, dealt with some dehydration problems early in training camp. And Adam Gase talked the other day, said he just looks so excited to be back there on the field, and he played so well, and that's a critical position in this defense. He does so many things. So there's Nate Hairston. You talk about guys who get in first team reps. He's another example, number 21, going through his back pedals right there. Yeah, Bless Austin is a guy who has kind of lined up with that first team throughout training camp. So you would think he's got an opportunity to be in the starting lineup against the Buffalo Bills. Getting the Sear back would be big, and then obviously Poole's your nickel. But then you talked about down the line, what's going to happen? Well, Arthur Millette is a guy who can play inside, can play outside. We've seen Hairston getting some reps with the first team like we just mentioned. And don't forget about Quincy Wilson as well. Joe Douglas traded for him, number 27. We're seeing a couple. There's 27 right now. Quincy Wilson on draft weekend.
That leads us to our injury update presented by Atlantic Health System. The good news here is that the list slowly but surely is getting shorter. One guy to keep an eye on, that's guard Alex Lewis.
Alex Lewis, shoulder soreness. They don't think there's any structural or damage there. He did not line up yesterday, but he was out there on the practice field watching offensive line drills. Frank Pollock put the guys through the paces. I thought throughout training camp here, the Jets' depth along the offensive line has been showcased. I like what I've seen out of Andrews, former Indianapolis Colt, who's lined up there on the inside. Actually, Greg Van Roten basically on a pitch count yesterday. He was only part of one team period.
Jonathan Harrison and Josh Andrews were the guys that filled in at the guard spots for Alex Lewis and Greg Van Roten, respectively. And now it's time to bring in Anthony Becht, who is going to be a part of our programming all season long. But Anthony, thank you so much for joining us here on Training Camp Live early in the morning. Appreciate it. How you doing?
Doing great, guys. Great to be on the show today. I'm really excited about the season. Number one, being back with the Jets, the broadcasting programs, the pre and post game, and really what this team is going to look like for the 2020 season. Should be really exciting and looking forward to it.
AB, I'm curious. You just kind of mentioned it. What do you expect this team to look like in the early stages of the season after an unprecedented offseason?
Well, I think across the league in general, I think everybody has to understand that without OTAs, without preseason, it's going to be critical to find depth and see what your rookies and undrafted guys and contributors that are new pieces to the football team can do early on in the season. And what that's going to create is maybe a little bit of a lull of a start, but that's across the board. So there's no real, reason to think that the Jets, if they were to come out and start slow or didn't look as clean, I think across the board in the NFL, it will look like that for every team. I think defenses will reign supreme early on just because of timing. Just in particular with the Jets, and you look at their lineup and the injuries and the guys that are banged up and you can't practice every day, and then you subtract what you haven't been able to do in the off season, it's going to take some time. But as these guys get healthier, hopefully after this weekend, you start minimizing that graph there with all those players that didn't practice and have nicks and bruises. And now you start building that roster, getting it set so that you can have a full week of practice with the majority of your starters and make sure everybody's ready to go for opening day.
We're so excited for the regular season, pre and post game. You will be part of Jets 360 Productions. Our post game show is going to be brand new this year, and I think people are going to love it. Anthony, the guy we were just showing to folks at home, Sam Darnold, number 14. What do you want to see from him this year? And part B of my question is, the Jets lived in 11 personnel last year because you got Jamison Crowder, Adam Gase, like the 3 wide receiver look. Now with Chris Herndon coming back, Ryan Griffin's still in the fold, Trayvon Wesco also making a 180 from his rookie season. He looks like he's really developed. Do you anticipate the Jets changing up their personnel packages quite a bit here, especially early in the year?
Right, yeah. So, for Sam's perspective, for him coming into the season, the things that I want to see from him is just growth at the line of scrimmage pre-snap. The most critical part of any quarterback in the league, and you see how the differences between the guys that are great, the guys that are kind of still trying to get there, and then some of the inexperienced guys, is the ability to have that plan. And when that plan breaks down, where do you go next? And we talk about that every year. We see signs of how Sam has improved that over the first 2 seasons. But I think in particular this year with some new pieces, a brand new offensive line that I'm excited to watch play on Sundays. I think that, to me, understanding those complexities, the defenses, and he gets to see quite a bit of it, guys, every day with Greg Williams, which is a premium for him to help speed the process. But again, really dialing into the opponents, what they could see, what were his downfalls the last season that he has to improve on, that maybe he showed signs of weaknesses on, being able to be critical in those situations and improve yourself in those areas. So those things, you may not see that from a perspective of from the fans and when you're watching it, but again, with the more completions, getting the ball in the right spot, getting to the open receiver that's there, finding those things out and be able to kind of knock out some of the things you see visually from the defense is going to be big. As far as you talked about formations and personnel settings, listen, I've said this prior to training camp being started. This is a prime opportunity for Chris Herndon. He has to peak at his highest level at the tight end position. Last year, with a mix of injuries and having suspension, and then the year before trying to figure out his way and get on the field and do some things and being nicked up, coming into camp, I know he's back now. And this is a year where, Sam's going to have to lean on him in a lot of certain situations. He is a mismatch problem. And I want to see what he looks like from his off-season work, being alone, really trying to better himself within not only the physical side, but the mental side. I think a lot of people think that, okay, you come in shape, you look great, your body's good, that all of a sudden that will translate into huge production. That's part of the offense details. Understand what you can do, your limitations and your positives as far as what that play's asking from you, where you can be in the certain routes, where your technique and how that improves within the system of play is critical. And that's where you have to take the steps as an NFL player to really enhance your game personally. So to me, how that maturity level works with Chris will ultimately define what this team can be and what they can run from a personnel standpoint. So, when you have those pieces there and he can be a factor, and now other tight ends can be a factor, if you can put those guys on there, now you have problems for defenses to cover you and you limit the things that they can bring to the table. And I think, to me, that's something that, if Adam Gase could say, yeah, we definitely want to do that, but it becomes a trust factor and accountability of the player that he can be put in those situations to make it work.
Chris Herndon, I think he can be the X factor for the entire team because he's got unique abilities. Adam Gase labeled him as a unicorn type player last year before the season, but he only played a handful of plays. He can stretch the field like few tight ends in the National Football League. He can open things up. I hate to stay on the offensive side of the ball, but I'm going to have to because you're down there in Tampa. You know Brashad Perryman more than most because you watch him with the Buccaneers last year flourish down the stretch. He's dealing with some knee swelling right now. Hopefully he's back on the practice field. What could he mean to Darnold? Because we saw him establish chemistry with his new receiver, Brashad Perryman, here early in camp. We're looking at Herndon right now. But what would a healthy Perryman mean for this team, and what could he provide Darnold?
For me, watching Perry, I watched every snap in a Buccaneers uniform of him last year. And to be quite honest with you, his role early on in the season was sporadic, right? I mean, he wasn't getting a ton of reps. When his opportunity came early in the season in different positions, you kind of weren't really seeing the best of him or what he could offer. As soon as Mike Evans went down, their number one receiver, he jumped into the mold, and I think his numbers were the best in the NFL the last 5 weeks of the season at the position. A ton of speed. He can track the football. He loves the deep ball. If he's even, he's leaving. That's kind of the mindset that you have when you kind of watch him on the field running his routes. He's got really good hands, and as those 5 weeks progressed, he became a guy that, honestly, you watch him, you want to watch more of him on film because he was a true number one. So having him back on the field, a little swelling in the knee, those things can happen. Hopefully it's not a big deal because if he can be there game one, moving forward, ready to go, you're talking about an elite weapon with a lot of speed that can run all the routes of the route tree, has really good hands. And honestly, he should be playing with a chip on his shoulder. A first-round draft pick. Everybody wrote him off at Baltimore. I covered him in college when he played at UCF. He was the best player on the field every game that I watched. So you get that kind of player on the field that can do those kind of things at that kind of level week in and week out, which we saw in a small window of 5 weeks last year. That's a game changer, because now you're talking about the Herndons and all those other guys and what that can create. And then also a guy on the inside, when you're talking about one-on-one beating coverages, Crowder becomes an even bigger factor. So having a consistent element on the outside, knowing he's going to be in the right spot, knowing he's going to be able to get open on the deep ball and be able to have that trust, is only going to help the development of your quarterback.
Awesome, AB. Thank you so much for joining us here on Training Camp Live. Looking forward to having you on our coverage all season long here in the BetMGM studio. Eric Allen, Ethan Greenberg here, Training Camp Live, presented by Atlantic Health System. Let's wrap up our final show of Training Camp with an edition of the Roundtable. Let's bring back in Olivia Landis, and we're going to go to the esports world with Madden. Okay, this is what's going to happen. Liv, I'm going to start with you, then I'm going to wrap up with EA, and then myself. Which Jets player is undervalued in Madden? It doesn't have to be from their overall. It could be a specific trait.
I really took a deep dive into this list, and I really looked at some of our players, their ratings. I have to say, Jamison Crowder, wide receiver Jamison Crowder, his overall rating is 80, which I personally think is very low for an individual who led the team in receiving yards and receiving touchdowns last year. But also a number that really caught my eye was his strength. His overall strength rating was 58. I don't know about you guys, but it's a little disrespectful. I mean, 58 is not a very high number, and for a slot receiver who I think was very valuable to the offense, didn't drop a lot of balls, and really had a great chemistry with Sam Darnold, I think he got a little low ball right there. But that's my overall. 80 I think is low, but the dagger was really the strength rating.
EA's shaking his head in studio, by the way. I think you might have stolen his thunder.
I got totally disrespected.
Hey, it's okay.
I think somebody shared my script with Liv or my notes, because I have this written down to a T. Jamison Crowder is an 80. That's ridiculous. Strength at 58 seems absurd. I mean, Liv stole all my thunder. This is so not right. So it's fine. Chris Herndon, his speed was at 80 and his agility was at a 75. I think Herndon was only a 72. I think people are sleeping on Herndon too, but I'm mad right now.
I like both of your answers,
Sorry about
even though
that.
it's the same one. But I'm going, it's twofold here. One is Big Steve is an 86 strength. If you've ever met Steve McClendon, he is more than an 86 strength, which is ridiculous.
He's
but
an 860.
But two, yeah, he's an 850. Two, let's keep it in the slot position. Braxton Barrios, my guy worked hard in the offseason, and he bulked up. And he got disrespected, and he took to Instagram about it. He said, when EA, Madden, NFL gives me a 50 in strength. I mean, if Jamison Crowder's a 58, what's Braxton Barrios? He should not be a 50. That's ludicrous.
I'm truly curious how they measure the strength.
Yeah, I don't
Truly
know.
curious.
Do you do photos like that at home? Do you put them on Instagram, Greens?
Do I take photos of my lack of my muscles? No, I don't.
Yourself after a workout?
No.
Getting your pump on. Do you put that on Instagram?
No,
or
I don't. No, I don't.
Oh, okay. All right.
But if I looked like Braxton Barrios, I would consider.
Okay. Listen, Barrios scored a touchdown here in training camp, and this was probably one of Green's favorite moments as he ran into the end zone, and we're all sitting there taking our notes, and I think Barrios gave Ethan a stare down. He gave him the mad stare.
Yeah, he did. He looked like through my soul. I didn't know what to do, so I just kind of did a head nod, and then he dapped up his player.
So I think after that, you had to go with Braxton here.
Yeah, I feel fair enough. But I did include Big Steve. Liv, thank you so much for joining us here on Training Camp Live. And as we wrap up here, EA, 90 seconds or less, what are your final thoughts here as the Jets transition from training camp into the regular season?
I mean, we're so blessed to be here, considering where we were a few months ago, right? And now the regular season is on the horizon. And for the Jets in the immediate future, let's just watch the guys who are a little bit banged up and hopefully get more back at practice. As far as on a macro level, big weekend for the organization because you're always looking to improve yourself out there. And then, hey man, it's the Buffalo Bills. And Adam Gase said our coaches have been working on the Bills for a while. So an uncertain regular season, but what the Jets are dealing with right now, it's no different than what any team is dealing with throughout the league. There's a lot of injuries after no spring and the virtual offseason, and you hear at practice half the day, you go home in the virtual world and things like that, but game on. After this weekend, we're in the regular season, and it's here.
That's how we wrap up here our final show of Training Camp Live presented by Atlantic Health System. Next time, EA and I are back in studio, it's live. It's live with practice today, so thank you so much for tuning in, not only today, but throughout training camp. Thank you to Earth Camp for additional coverage, and we'll see you next week.